The major difference between the two doctrines is that while impossibility excuses performance where the contractual duty cannot physically be performed, the doctrine of impracticability comes into play where performance is still physically possible, but would be very burdensome for the party whose performance is due. Thus, impossibility is an objective condition, where impracticability is a subjective condition for a court to determine. Now, going back to my example where the car gets towed and it would cost $1,000 in order for the person to deliver the car on time, they might be able to raise the impracticability defense. Here are the elements for this defense. There must be an occurrence or a condition, the non-occurrence of which was a basic assumption of the contract. 2. The occurrence must make performance extremely expensive or difficult. 3. This difficulty was not anticipated by the parties to the contract. Now, it says, note, some jurisdictions require that there be no measure within the contract itself to allocate risk between the parties. People have the ability to make a bad contract or a bad deal. And if someone puts in that contract that impracticability is no defense, and both people agree to it, well then impracticability is not going to be a defense. Let's say, for example, not just my car, but let's say that both parties knew that in order, let's say you were getting a shipment that we knew was going to go through the Panama Canal, from China through the Panama Canal to Florida. But for whatever reason, the Panama Canal was closed. And as a result, this item was, let's say, for whatever reason, could not be shipped across the land in Panama, but instead the shipment would have to go all the way down South America and come back around, so that they cost so much more in shipping. The parties believed that it was going to be shipped, and then as a result go through the Panama Canal and cost X amount of dollars, but now it costs Y amount of dollars, it's just way, way, way high. Then the person might be able to raise an impracticability defense. So let me just go over the names of these. Impossibility, frustration of purpose, and impracticability are ways to get out of having to enforce the contract. Additionally, if the subject of the contract was not legal, then that would be a way to get the contract would not be, someone if they went to court would not be able to enforce the contract. Lack of capacity can be raised by the party of whom the contract is trying to be enforced against. Now, if you're thinking, well, I delivered my car, I want my $100, and the person's saying, well, I was intoxicated, or I was an infant, or I was incompetent, so I shouldn't have to fulfill my end of the bargain. Well, that could be. But as a result, they'd have to give the car back. They don't get to keep the car and not have to pay the $100. The car would have to be given back. So don't feel bad for the person who sold the car in my example. They will be able to sue in order to, I mean, if the contract's unenforceable, it doesn't mean that they lose out their consideration part of the contract. Alright, the next portion of what we're going to discuss would be best if you pause this tape and go to question number 23 on the research project and be able to locate that item for what we're about to discuss. That item is the contract for sale, or it's actually question 23A on the research project. It's the contract for sale and purchase it's by the Florida Bar and the Florida Association of Realtors. This is what it looks like, although I doubt this camera is zooming in here. But it's a number of pages long. It has on it pretty much everything that's in, starting on page 131 of the book, what's included in offer of purchase and contract. So when you're reading the book, or I've read the book, and you look at that contract, you'll be able to understand why it is that all those items that are contained in the contract. What you should also take note are certain things such as on page on line number 176 on the contract for sale and purchase is the line or sentence that says in bold, time is of the essence in this contract. You'll see when you read the book that with that language in there, if the contract doesn't close on the date the contract says, but the time is of the essence in this contract, what that language means is that the contract doesn't close on that day, the contract is void. You'll see that when you read the book here. You also see on line number 216 are a number of sentences about the risk of loss. When you're reading the book about risk of loss and you're reading the contract about what the risk of loss is, think about what I said before about the impracticability defense, about whether it can be raised or not, and why it is that there's a risk of loss provision in the contract. Alright, now going back a couple pages in the book. There are different types of real estate contracts between the seller of the home and that's available to the seller. There's no requirement that you go through a real estate broker. Some people would say it's the best thing to have a real estate agent or a real estate broker. Obviously, if you have someone who's assisting you in selling the house who has the legal ability to collect a commission, this is a real estate agent or broker, there are certain types of listings that affect these people. When you read the book, there's the open listing. The book says that that's not common to have an open listing. It just means whichever broker sells whichever broker produces a buyer gets a commission. Exclusive listing means the seller employs only one individual who has the legal authority to close the sale. No broker other than the one with whom the seller has a contract will receive a commission for producing a buyer. Because of the limited nature of this arrangement, exclusive listings are also not that common. But what the most common one is the multiple listing. And on question 20 of the research project is where you need to pull up or attach a copy of a multiple listing. But under the multiple listing, basically the commission is shared between the broker who produces a buyer, as well as the listing agent also shares in the commission. One thing you should know on a level unrelated to the book here is many real estate agents will say that the commission is 6%. That is all, like many things, is negotiable. You can sign a contract with a real estate agent and you might say to them, hey listen, I'm not going to sign this contract unless it's 4%. They might say to you, well then we're not going to be selling the property. Well, that's fine. You can look around until you find someone who will sell it for 4%. But you might not find anyone, and then you might end up having to sign a contract for 6%. But that number, there's nothing special about the number. You can sign a contract that has a number less than 6% if that's what you want to do, and can find someone who's willing to sell it for less than 6%. Another thing you need to understand is who the broker works for. The broker, unless the buyer of the home signs an exclusive contract with a broker to represent the buyer, really the person that the broker is working for is the seller of the home. And there's some, I believe on the research project, there's some language in there or questions in there about contractual relationships with a broker. Alright, what if there is a breach of contract? What are remedies that are available for the breach of the contract? Now going back to my example with the car for $100, if the person refuses to pay the $100, you sue them for the $100. If the person doesn't produce the car, you sue for specific performance. That the court enter an order that specifically requires the performance, the delivering of the car. What if the person doesn't, what if the car is no longer available? What if the person they didn't sell it to you for $100 because someone else offered them $250 for the car? So of course they're saying, well why, I know I have a binding contract with you for $100, but forget that, I'll go sell the car for $250. So then potentially, when you sue them for money, you can't do specific performance because they don't have the car, so obviously they can't specifically deliver the car.